Welcome to segment 2, Gold and Black Live. Always nice to have Mike DeCourcy on our show because he will bring a level of expertise and knowledge that we don't often get it from a national perspective. And in all of his experience, a Hall of Fame level reporter, you wear many, many hats and you wear them well and always do it with grace, Mike. But welcome to Gold and Black Live in segment 2 here on this Friday, cold Friday in Indiana on January 21st.
The irony of that is that I'm not a hat person. I almost never wear a hat.
Neither am I. Even though I got nothing up here, I stay away from hats too much.
Well, good morning and happy to do it. Did I lose you?
Nope. I'm good. I just heard I lost in the front end. You hear me okay?
I'm hearing you great.
Okay. And tell me, obviously last night Purdue took it on the chin in a big way. In a very disappointing loss from a Purdue perspective, but a huge win for Indiana. Put that game, Purdue fans are struggling for perspective on a day like today. Put that in perspective a little bit of what you see from what you saw from last night, but also where it means in the big picture, not only of the Big Ten race, but of NCAA seedings.
Well, I think first of all, going into that game, I knew that was about as all in as Indiana as a crowd was going to be in terms of they had so much that they had built up, the 9-game losing streak, the hope that this was a change forward in the program, everything. They had so much to invest in that game, and I knew they were going to put it all out there as a crowd. Now, obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean the players follow, but then you had the added intrigue of Rob Finney getting what was basically his last shot against his hometown team at home. And I did not expect that, what he delivered in the first half, but I wasn't surprised that he would come out highly motivated. So that's on the one side. That's what you had to fight against. No real surprises from the standpoint of what you had to fight against. From the Purdue perspective, I think that the problems that they have as a team were amplified by the circumstance. And that particular problem is in the generation of their offense. They do not have first of all, they don't have one point guard. That old saying in football, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. It's a little harsh. And it certainly is harsh when it's translated to basketball, but it is a complication. When you don't have one voice, that's a clear director to what you're doing. It complicates things. And when neither of the players you play at that position is a natural voice or a natural creator, they both have strengths as college players. Isaiah is a terrific shooter. Eric is a very good defensive player. They both have strengths, but neither one of them is a natural quarterback creator, leader at the point. It just doesn't, it's just not who they are as players. So generating offense, although you have lots of weapons, the initiation, I guess maybe more so the initiation of the offense is complicated. And that's why they've been running a lot of their stuff through Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey going downhill is the most dangerous player in college basketball. I mean, getting him, stopping him is really difficult. The problem that they ran into to an extent at Illinois and certainly last night at Indiana is that Jaden has become more daring in that sense. And I think there are good elements of that, but I also think that it leads him into situations where he's airborne and there's no obvious outlet. I think Purdue has to do better. His teammates have to do better at knowing when he's downhill, I got to get to somewhere where he can see me and I'm open. That has to happen, and it has to happen fast because he goes so fast. So they have his teammates, Sasha, Eric, whoever it is, they have to get to spots where he can see them. And that's also true of the bigs, whoever might be in the game at the time. They have to find open space where he can see them. So his only option isn't to shot. He took shots last night and on Monday that were only because it was his last resort. He was airborne. He was on the move. There was no apparent teammate. Ball's got to go on the rim. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I call it the Allen Iverson assist. If you can do that in a way so that the defense is reacting to you and draw it to you, and therefore the ball comes off to one of your teammates because they're uncovered, they score. I call it, and like I said, I invented that term a long time ago. I call it the Allen Iverson assist. He's attacking with such force and with such suddenness that he's not even generating a reaction. I mean, they can't even figure out how to get to him in a lot of cases. So guys are staying home defensively to block out Travion or Zach or whomever. And so the ball's just going high off the board. It's caroming off, and it's being gathered by the opposition. Now, a lot of those daring attacks are leading to free throws. So he scored big at Illinois because of that. I think he had 15 free throws that night, at least 15.
Right. That's right.
So that's good. And you want that because that really damages the defense. But situationally last night, when there were opportunities where we got to get a bucket here because we're down 5 and we need to get it to 3, or we're down 3 and we need to get it to 1, or whatever it might have been. And if we give up, if we don't get a bucket, then IU's got a chance to go down and extend the lead, make it multiple possessions, whatever. So there were situations where he chose that as the option, and it didn't succeed, and that helped Indiana pad their lead, etc. So that element of Purdue's offense needs refinement. But when it gets refined, it's going to be the most dangerous weapon in college basketball. You can't stop him in terms of like getting in front of him is so difficult. And with the right screen and the right action and the right clear outs, I mean, he is just devastating. So it's not a bad thing necessarily that he had this week where he didn't get shots to go down. Would it have been better if from a Purdue standpoint, would it have been better if last night was similar to Monday and he had that kind of performance, but you won because it was certainly available? Yeah, sure. But the lesson you have to take from those two performances is, how do we turn that? I don't know the exact number, but he shot under 50 in both games, well under 50. How do you turn that into more 50+% shooting performances, plus the free throws, plus the dump offs to teammates? All those things go into making that element of the Purdue attack an indomitable weapon. And I don't think it's that far away, but it has to be understood what needs to be done to make it happen. Now, I know Matt understands, but I'm trying to help Purdue fans understand what happened and what needs to happen.
Yeah, January 20th is different than March the 10th too. And Matt Painter is, I think we all have a healthy respect for what he can develop and what he can get his team to do. And that is an interesting analysis of what needs to happen. Travion Williams also has struggled in the last couple of games, but he's been very good. And one of the things that I think, as I mentioned your take, this is an interesting problem, a good problem, people always say, but I'm not sure it is. You have 10 players. Matt Painter, most coaches like that 8 number. And yet you've got guys that how do you say no to Ethan Morton? How do you say no to Brandon Newman? But Matt Painter seems to talk after every game about, the guys not getting in the flow. And it seems to be a bothersome thing to him. I know it is. How do you view that? And do you see possibly that they'll trim that down as they get closer? Or is he just going to have to figure out a way to keep all 10 in the fold?
I think it's really hard to be great playing 10 guys, especially if you're not a pressing team. And that's not Matt's style. And I don't think it needs to be or should be. I mean, they play their way. And certainly it wouldn't make sense to press with Zach or Travion anyway. So that's not an option. So 10 is a lot, and it's hard to be great with that. So I think that, it's nice to have 10 players in case somebody gets hurt, especially somebody like 6, 7, 8. Then you got 9 and 10 that can play. If you get hurt 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's a problem no matter what, even if you have really good players at 8, 9, 10. So that's a nice thing to have, but it does, when that many players expect to play and go through their practice sessions and probably earn playing time,
Yeah.
So it's hard to find a way to be great with that. But it's sort of an extension of the very fundamental thing that at the two most prominent positions, center and point guard, they have two players at each of those that are very different players. And so their identity shifts, not necessarily from the standpoint of culture or approach or even scheme, but different players. I mean, Zach Edey is not Travion. They're totally different players. Although, Zach can post and Travion can post, but they do it in different ways. They catch the ball differently. They like different sides of the rim, perhaps. So that part of it is what makes this Purdue complicated. Because you're really almost a different team every time you take the floor. And I don't mean every time you take the floor in a game. I mean every time you come out of a timeout, you're kind of a different team. So finding that ideal rotation and rhythm is always going to be complicated for this team. I don't know that fades with time, again, because you're a different team with Travion than you are with Zach, and you're a different team with Thompson than you are with Hunter. So that, from that standpoint, I think that's something that Purdue's going to have to live with and find a way to turn it into a strength. And one of the ways you turn that into a strength is that you wear down the opposition, you get them into foul trouble, and you never are, because, okay, so Zach's got 3. Well, this is Travion's night, or vice versa. Whereas Kofi Coburn gets 4, and Illinois has to play a player who is essentially a backup. Purdue's play, both those guys are starters. It's not the same.
Yeah, and a huge factor for Purdue if the Boilermakers have a chance to make that run. So looking at the landscape of, and you're looking at it when you're doing your bracketology or your bracket updates, I should say, and when you have that, are you still as bullish on Purdue? I mean, it's based on some of the things you've commented on. Purdue should be right there, but what's it going to take for this team to get to the Final Four? And in the landscape, are you seeing some other teams develop that may be able to sneak in there? And I know that's kind of a silly question in some ways, because it's a 68-team tournament and teams always find a way to sneak in there. But what are you seeing right now, at least as of January 21st?
I think they're very much still a contender for a 1 seed, although their second half of the Big Ten schedule will have to be much better than the first to be on the 1 line. It's still within reach for them. There are probably, I'm going to say, 8 to 10 teams that still could be 1s, somewhere in that ballpark. It's going to be hard to get Gonzaga off the 1 line, but they haven't gone on the road yet. They played 2 really difficult West Coast Conference games within the last 10 days, but both of them were at home. It seems that the West Coast Conference has an understanding that for the appeal of their league, you build up the Zags by playing their toughest games at home in the first half, and then you challenge them and make it interesting for viewers. Gonzaga playing at home is okay, they'll win by how much? But Gonzaga going to San Francisco or wherever, so we don't know. We don't know whether or not they'll hang on to that, but it's going to be hard to get it away from them. Arizona is a 1 right now, but they haven't played their toughest league opponents, SC and UCLA, because they had a COVID pause in SoCal, and those games got wiped. And Auburn plays Kentucky on Saturday. Auburn does not have a lot of high-end opportunities in the league. As good as the SEC is, their schedule just worked out so that it's very light. They don't have to go to Kentucky. They don't have to go to LSU. Those are both top 10 teams, and they don't have to play either of them on the road. So it's big for Auburn in the sense of they need the quality, but as things go by, they may just get it numerically because they won't lose much. So there's that. And so I think that all those teams are in the mix. Duke, I think, would look at itself and say that they're kind of in Purdue's boat right now, that they haven't found the rhythm. They don't know where to go at point guard, but they've got a lot of ability. They have a tremendous coach. So there are a lot of similarities there. And I don't think anybody would rule Duke out of a 1. So I'm not going to rule Purdue by any sense out of the 1, especially with all the opportunities to get great wins that exist in the Big Ten.
Yeah, Purdue's just looking a little further down the schedule, and then going to Iowa next week, and even North, it's funny in the Big Ten, so even Sunday at home against Northwestern, Tom Izzo can tell you a thing or two about that. Purdue will have to be focused from that standpoint to get to where it needs to get. All right, when you look at the landscape of the Big Ten, again, Wisconsin has shown Purdue what it can do. Ohio State has been dangerous. Is this just a league of dangerous teams, maybe outside of Purdue, even though Purdue's not in first place? But how do you really see this league stack up, and how do you think it will finish this last 8 weeks of the regular season? Do you think?
It's interesting, Alan, because I've always thought going into this year and as the seasons develop that Illinois is the team in the league that has the highest ceiling, and so for Purdue to go into their building and get a win, I think paid off obviously in the short run, and I think it will grow in value. I think a win against them was like buying Amazon in 1999 or whatever, because I think it's going to,
which we all
maybe
did.
not quite that valuable, but the idea that it's going to grow, I think it will. But Illinois also, they have some things to work through because they do have a point guard in Andre Curbelo, but he hadn't played in 6 weeks or so, and he came back against the Boilers, and I think that there's a chance that they will lose a game or two because they're trying to work him back in. I don't think the Purdue game was one of those. I think they lost that game, one, because Sasha was tremendous shooting the ball, and two, because Kofi got himself fouled out on some, not on, some people would say on bad. No, he committed bad fouls. Those were fouls that he got himself into bad situations. And one of those was just, maybe even two, were just Jaden being so sudden that Kofi, no basketball player says, if I don't get out of his way, I'm going to foul him. They say, well, I can't just leave the basket open. So he fouled him twice, and it was very punishing to Illinois. So I think over the next week or two, it'll be interesting to see how Illinois is able to reincorporate such a uncommon point guard into their operation, and whether they can reach their peak immediately. And it's obviously there's no guarantee you reach your peak, but I still think their peak is really high if they can get there. Wisconsin's just rock solid. They are so, they are so well designed and well coached, and they such great students of the game that they have a real understanding. Johnny Davis has become such a objective for every defense. We got to stop Johnny Davis. He can hit us with 35. And so they're throwing so much at him. And the other players on that team are like, okay, you want to do that? We'll do it. We're not going to overdo it. Tyler Wall, Brad Davison, they won't overdo it. But if you're going to give them opportunities, they're going to punish you. And they have, over the last few games, punished teams that have overweighted onto Johnny Davis. So I think Wisconsin has proven that they are a team that you're going to have to beat, that they are not going to give you much help in that regard. And so they will be difficult to beat for the league title. I have not done any sort of analysis of who it looks like has the easiest road or the toughest road, or are they all kind of equal? But I think Wisconsin, Illinois, and Purdue are still the three best teams in this league. And Michigan State, it's interesting because Tom Izzo was really mad at his team after the Northwestern game. And he talked about how he thought they got fat and sassy. That's one of his favorite phrases when his team, kind of gets their head out in the clouds. I don't know what they have to be fat and sassy about. I mean, they were winning games, but they weren't beating great teams. They haven't played the best this league has to offer yet. So they don't have much. They have a lot to prove and not much proven. I still think they're very good, but they've got to get their offense. They've got to find a consistent method of offense. What do they want to be? Who do they want to score? Who do they want? They're not going to have a Johnny Davis, but if you don't have a first option, if you don't have a real direction you want to run your offense, it's harder to scout you because anybody could beat you on a given night. But it's also harder for you to be productive because you're always just searching for the guy who might have the hot night, or you're always looking for the open man, and sometimes you're the open man and you're passing that up. So I think Michigan State needs to know what it wants its offense to be. And I don't think they found that yet.
Yeah, always fantastic analysis and interesting things I haven't thought of, and that's part of having Mike DeCourcy on the show. And we didn't even get to about half the things I want to talk about. We'll do that. We'll do that next week. No, we'll do that in our next opportunity to talk. You're a busy person and have a lot on your plate. We'll be watching you closely. I know Purdue fans will be as you put together your bracket analysis as you get closer to March Madness. One thing that's great, have fans in the stands and environments, even though difficult for Purdue, like we saw last night at Indiana, you're going to have a Big Ten environment every night in Mackey Arena as well. So Mike, thanks again so much for joining us. And we'll look forward to our next discussion and watching your work in a number of different places as we watch the 2022 basketball season unfold. It's going to be interesting. So thanks again so much.
My honor, Alan. Thank you.
All right, we'll be back for segment 3. Craig Terrell, former Purdue defensive lineman, and the Seattle Seahawks will talk some NFL, and he'll probably also talk about that disappointing loss for Purdue. It seems to have shook the Purdue world today. We'll look forward to that in about 2 minutes. We'll join us again for segment 3 of Gold and Black Live.